Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the B segment of episode 4 of The Loud House, A Tale of Two Tables. We begin this segment with Lincoln explaining to the audience that while some families bring in an adult table and a kids table for holidays where extended relatives and maybe even close family friends come over, having two tables for dinner is a regular occurrence for Lincoln's family. In the case of the Loud family, the parents and the oldest Loud sisters eat at the adults table while Lincoln and the youngest Loud sisters eat at the kids' table. Growing annoyed at his youngest sister's antics at the kids' table, Lincoln decides he wants to eat at the adults' table, and he enlists the help of his friend Clyde to do so, since Clyde is an only child, and therefore he and his parents only have one table for regular everyday meals. Clyde decides to help Lincoln with a series of 3 steps about how to prove how grown up he is to his family. The first step is acting like a grown up, which in their mind is shaving, drinking coffee, settling disputes between younger siblings. But the onlookers, or the ones who see these actions, are just more scratching their heads and going, "Say what?" But Lincoln and Clyde seem to think it's successful. The second step involves etiquette at the grown-ups table. Clyde arranges for where certain silverware is to go on the table, which food belongs to who when it's like bread or kind of side dishes. And also what you should say while you're at the grown-ups table. Like, to name an example, Clyde says that you shouldn't talk about politics at the dinner table. I agree with Clyde on that, by the way. The third and final step is to look like a grown-up, which in their case, they try to make Lincoln look refined or sophisticated. Like, they comb his hair back, they make a suit for him, and yeah, Lincoln then asks his question if he can join at the grown-ups table, and he brings note cards along. The parents decide, yeah, let's give Lincoln a chance to prove himself, so Lincoln joins them. But the grown-up table is not the high-class society style that Lincoln was hoping for. He finds it rather dull, though. Luann mentions they can't tell jokes at the table. Luna says they can't sing at the table. The food they serve is not to Lincoln's taste, and yeah, I'd have to agree with him there. It's not really to my liking either. And they just ask mundane questions like, oh, how was that math test? Or how was work, sort of deal. Although one question Mr. Loud asks Lori is how did Bobby's father do after his hernia operation? That was a pretty interesting question, and we'll talk about that later. But otherwise, Lincoln is not very thrilled with the grown-ups table experience, and he calls Clyde to tell him this and figure out how he can get out of it. But Clyde says he can't back out now because his family won't take him seriously if he asks for something like that again. Then we get a rather unsettling nightmare where Lincoln fears he's doomed to stay at the grown-ups table. Like, his parents' heads are replaced with turkeys, there's like a ball and chain on the adults table, and the oldest sisters are speaking in a creepy way. They're saying things along the lines of, "You can never go back, bro. You're one of us now, a grown-up." Ooh. After the nightmare, Lincoln still is hoping to figure out a way to get out of being at the grown-ups table, but when he turns to his beloved stuffed animal, Bun Bun, he wonders that maybe there is a way to get out of it. His solution? act immature at the grown-ups table. In fact, he uses some of the tactics that annoyed him at the beginning that his younger sisters did to him at the beginning of the segment. The parents fall for it and they demand Lincoln return to the kids' table. He takes it extremely well. But it turns out he's not the only one. Lynn actually asks if she can join them, and then the 4 oldest Loud sisters follow after. It turns out they all miss the kids' table and the food that comes with it. Mr. Loud, though, is quite okay to have peace and quiet at the adults' table, but it ends with Mrs. Loud throwing peas at him. And that's where we end the segment. So this was rather unique compared to some of the earlier segments that we covered, because while it's true Lincoln is the main character and he is the viewpoint character, that is to say we usually follow the segment through his perspective, this one didn't have the Loud sisters in much of a prevalent role in comparison. Like, they kind of felt like they sort of were in the back seat, so to speak, for this one. It really seemed like it was more, because at least in earlier segments, the sisters as a whole might still have played a role in it, or at least 1 or 2 of the sisters might have helped out in a significant way, or played a somewhat more significant role compared to the others. But this time around, it really did feel like it was more so just on Lincoln, with Clyde helping out, and I was actually okay with that. I didn't really mind too much, since in those earlier segments, and in most of the show in general, the premise is usually just Lincoln kind of reacting to whatever chaotic shenanigans are going on that his sisters may be a part of, or maybe even other characters. So this, relatively speaking, not so chaotic episode, just Lincoln kind of having doing his own thing that his sisters weren't really involved in. I thought that was actually a rather interesting take, and I thought it kind of helped Lincoln stand out in his own way, since some might refer to Lincoln as a vanilla protagonist. That's usually to say the main character's not as interesting compared to the characters who they react to or surrounded by, the supporting cast, because they're like, vanilla is good and all, but it tastes better with sprinkles or so. Or I mean, I like vanilla with sprinkles. That's my favorite ice cream at Dairy Queen. But yeah, I thought this was a nice way to kind of see Lincoln stand out without really reacting to his sisters doing something. It was more just him on his own little journey, I guess you could call it. Well, I mean, as much of a journey for a mundane, everyday slice of life thing, or you get what I mean. It was kind of just Lincoln doing his own thing rather than reacting to something that involved his sisters, and I thought that was a pretty nice take overall, actually. It kind of was a nice breather. I think it might have been intentional, since it was paired with The Sweet Spot, which did involve a lot of chaotic action. Although it had some quiet moments, so like a calm before the storm, and then a storm hit. This one felt relatively more relaxed, and I was cool with that. And Bun Bun was a nice touch. I think we've seen him in the background, but this is, I believe, production order-wise, I believe this is the first time Bun Bun has his name mentioned, and we sort of do see how Lincoln cares for him. It's a nice gag, too, that kind of a development gag, because for those unfamiliar, Lincoln was originally going to be, well, the main family, the Loud family, were actually originally going to be rabbits, and I think Lincoln was going to be called Warren, I believe, and he had over 20 sisters, because, rabbits are explosive breeders, so yeah, but it was one of the executives suggested to Chris Savino that he make them human to make them more relatable, and Chris Savino himself actually considers that to be some of the best advice he's been given, and we wouldn't have the show as we know it today if it wasn't for that advice. But it was nice that Bun Bun kind of references that early concept or that earlier idea. And as for the part where they mention Bobby's dad having a hernia operation, let's just say with later segments, when we learn more about the Santiago family, that particular bit of information has led to a lot of speculation. And I actually do want to cover a speculation center video about Bobby's father, Mr. Santiago. So we'll get into more about why that detail caught my attention and many other viewers' attention. There'll be a segment where I feel it'll be relevant to bring it up again, so just keep that information in the back of your mind for now, because we are going to come back to that at a later point in the future. Now, as for which segment I like better, this one's actually a pretty tough call. I actually like both segments in their own ways. Like I said before, the sweet spot was sort of a calm before the storm, and then we had a big storm hit. While this one, relatively speaking, was more relaxed and more about Lincoln doing his own thing rather than reacting to any chaos that was happening within his family. So I liked them both. They were both fun segments for me. I don't think I really liked one better than the other or thought one was inferior to the other. So this was a pretty good run for me, if you ask me. Well, we've now discussed episode 4 on this channel now, and we'll be continuing along with the future episodes and segments. Take care, and until next time.